I've been working on Toyotas and Lexus vehicles for 19 years. I visited the Toyota test facility near Mount Fuji in 2017, where engineers drive prototypes up and down mountain passes for months testing cooling systems under conditions most American drivers never see. When I asked why they test so aggressively, one engineer told me, if it survives here, it will survive anywhere, but only if the owner maintains it the way we designed it to be maintained. That sentence changed how I've approached every cooling system repair since. The average Toyota cooling system in Japan lasts the entire life of the vehicle. The same system in America often fails before 150,000 miles. Same car, same components, different maintenance approach. If you want to know how to maintain your cooling system the way the engineers intended, hit subscribe, because what I'm about to show you isn't in any American owner's manual. Number 1. Change your coolant every 50,000 miles, not 100,000. American dealerships recommend coolant changes at 100,000 miles or more. They call it long-life coolant, extended interval coolant. Some manufacturers even call it lifetime fluid. In Japan, Toyota mechanics laugh at that term. There is no such thing as lifetime coolant. Here's why the gap exists. American dealerships make significantly more money replacing radiators, water pumps, and heater cores than changing coolant. A coolant change costs around $120. A radiator replacement costs $1,200. The incentive structure isn't built around prevention, it's built around repair. The additive package in your coolant does serious chemical work. It prevents corrosion on aluminum surfaces, lubricates the water pump seal, and maintains pH balance so the system doesn't eat itself from the inside. After about 50,000 miles, those additives start breaking down. When coolant turns acidic, it attacks the water pump housing, radiator tubes, and heater core. I inspected a Camry V6 last year with 280,000 miles. The owner had changed coolant every 50,000 miles since new. When I pulled the radiator, the inside looked almost new. No corrosion, no buildup. That's what happens when you maintain the chemistry the system was designed around. A 50,000-mile coolant change costs $120. It prevents a $1,200 radiator replacement, an $800 water pump job, and a $1,500 heater core replacement. Spend $120 every few years or spend thousands fixing components that failed because the fluid protecting them turned into acid. Use only genuine Toyota red coolant or an exact equivalent meeting Toyota specification. Never use universal green coolant. Never use orange Dexcool. The cooling system was engineered around a specific coolant chemistry. That chemistry is Toyota Super Long Life Coolant. Number 2. Vacuum fill the cooling system. Stop doing drain and fill. When you drain and fill a cooling system the normal way, you're replacing maybe 70% of the old coolant. The rest stays trapped in the engine block, heater core, and passages you can't reach. Air gets trapped in those same places. That air creates hot spots, prevents proper circulation, and causes the temperature gauge to fluctuate. Over time, those hot spots accelerate component wear. Vacuum filling uses a vacuum pump to pull all the air out of the cooling system before adding new coolant. Once the system is under vacuum, you open the valve and coolant gets sucked in to fill the void. No air, complete fill, perfect circulation from the first start. This is how every Toyota cooling system is filled at the factory. This is how they're serviced in Japan. In America, almost no one does it because the equipment costs around $400 and most shops don't want to invest in it. I've been using a vacuum filler for 11 years. I've never had a comeback for air pocket issues, not one. Before I started using it, I'd get calls a week after a coolant change saying the temp gauge was reading high or the heater wasn't blowing hot. That was trapped air. You can buy a vacuum filler for DIY use for around $150. The tool is called a UView Airlift and it works on any vehicle with a standard radiator cap. If you plan to keep your Toyota for 200,000 miles or more, it pays for itself in the first use. What happens when you don't remove the air? The water pump tries to circulate coolant but also moves air bubbles. Air doesn't transfer heat. The engine runs hotter in those areas. The head gasket sees more stress. The cylinder head expands unevenly. I've seen head gasket failures on high-mileage Camrys and Highlanders that had no other issues except improper coolant fills that left air in the system for years. A vacuum filler costs $150. A head gasket replacement costs $2,000. Number 3. Replace your radiator cap every 100,000 miles. The radiator cap maintains the pressure that raises the boiling point of your coolant from 212 degrees to 265 degrees. Without that pressure, your coolant boils in traffic on a hot day. The cap contains a spring and a seal. Over time, the spring weakens and the seal hardens. The cap stops holding the 14 to 18 psi the system needs. I pulled a radiator cap off a Tacoma with 190,000 miles last month. The owner was complaining about occasional overheating in slow traffic. I tested the cap. It was only holding 9 psi. I installed a new OEM cap, $12, problem solved. A $12 cap prevents overheating. Overheating causes head gasket failure. Head gasket failure costs $2,000 to $4,000. The cap also prevents coolant from boiling out of the overflow, which causes low coolant levels, which causes more overheating, which accelerates every other failure mode in the system. You don't hear about preventive radiator cap replacement because it's too cheap to be worth recommending to dealerships. A service advisor makes nothing on a $12 cap. They make commission on the diagnostic time and repair that follows when the cap fails and causes a bigger problem. Number 4, inspect your cooling system hoses every oil change. Toyota's mountain testing revealed that cooling system hoses fail from the inside out, not the outside in. You can have a hose that looks perfect on the outside with no cracks or visible wear, but the inside lining has started to delaminate. Small pieces of rubber break off and circulate through the system, clogging radiator tubes, damaging the water pump seal, and creating blockages that cause localized overheating. Don't just look at the hoses, squeeze them near the clamps. A good hose has consistent firmness along its entire length. A failing hose feels spongy in some areas and rock hard in others. That's the internal lining breaking down. By the time a hose leaks, it's been failing internally for months. During those months, it's been shedding debris into your cooling system. I've cut open hoses that looked brand new on the outside but were completely deteriorated inside. The inner lining was cracked and peeling. Pieces were circulating through the cooling system and slowly clogging the radiator. The owner had no idea because every visual inspection showed a fine hose. Replace any hose that feels inconsistent. A full set of OEM cooling system hoses for a Camry costs around $250. A radiator replacement caused by clogged tubes costs $1,200. Shops don't recommend hose replacement until they see a leak because that's the obvious failure point. Japanese engineers replace hoses on a schedule, not on a failure. Number 5, replace your thermostat every 100,000 miles. Most people think the thermostat just opens and closes to regulate temperature. That's true, but it's not the whole story. The thermostat also creates the pressure differential that drives coolant flow through the engine. When a thermostat starts to fail, it doesn't always stick closed and cause immediate overheating. Sometimes it sticks partially open. The engine takes longer to warm up, fuel economy drops, the heater doesn't get as hot, and the cooling system never reaches full operating pressure. A thermostat that sticks closed causes catastrophic overheating. A thermostat that sticks open causes poor fuel economy and inadequate heating. Both failures are preventable with scheduled replacement. The part costs around $40. Labor is about 2 hours at a shop, making the total around $250 to $300. Here's the part that surprises people. A failing thermostat doesn't just affect temperature, it affects emissions. Modern Toyotas run precise fuel and timing maps that depend on the engine reaching a specific operating temperature. If the thermostat sticks partially open, the engine runs too cold, and the computer richens the fuel mixture. I replaced a thermostat on a Highlander with 210,000 miles. The owner had to check engine light for a catalyst efficiency code. The catalyst wasn't bad, the engine was running too cold. I replaced the $40 thermostat. The light stayed off. A $1,500 catalytic converter replacement avoided. Nobody tells you to replace thermostats preventively because the symptoms of a failing thermostat are vague and easy to ignore. When something dramatic happens, you pay diagnostic time plus the repair. Scheduled replacement skips all of that. Number 6, check your coolant level every time you check your oil. Not when the low coolant light comes on. Every oil change, pop the hood, look at the overflow reservoir. The level should be between the min and max lines when the engine is cold. If it's dropping over a few weeks, you have a leak somewhere. Find it and fix it before it becomes an overheating problem. Japanese engineers discovered that mountain driving creates pressure spikes that stress the water pump seal. The pump might not leak visibly, but the seal develops a slow weep that allows coolant and air to mix. That mixture gets pushed into the overflow reservoir. Over time, you lose coolant volume, circulation drops, and overheating follows. I've diagnosed dozens of overheating issues that started as a tiny weep from the water pump seal. The owner never checked the coolant level. The reservoir slowly emptied. By the time the temp gauge climbed, the system was half empty and the engine had already overheated multiple times. That kind of overheating causes head gasket damage. A water pump replacement costs $500 to $700. Ignoring the leak turns a $700 job into a $3,000 job. The reason no one tells you to check coolant level regularly is because it's not a billable service. A shop can't charge you to pop the hood and look at a reservoir, so it doesn't appear on service menus. Number 7, do a full flush every 100,000 miles, not just a drain and fill. Debris in the cooling system kills radiators faster than age. Gasket material, deteriorated hose lining, fragments of corroded aluminum, all of it circulates until it lodges in the narrow tubes of the radiator. Once it lodges, it blocks flow. That section of the radiator stops cooling. The engine runs hotter and more components start to fail. A drain and fill replaces the fluid but leaves the sediment that settles in the block and the radiator. A full flush uses a machine that reverses flow and pushes debris out of the system. It removes years of accumulated contamination, restores flow, and extends the life of every component. I flushed a cooling system on a 4Runner with 250,000 miles. The fluid that came out was brown, not red, brown. After the flush, the system held temperature better, the heater blew hotter, and the radiator fan cycled less frequently. All of that from removing debris that had been choking the system for years. A proper flush costs $200. It prevents a $1,200 radiator replacement and an $800 water pump replacement. Most shops don't offer real flushes because the machine costs a few $1,000s and the service takes longer than a drain and fill. But the Japanese engineers who tested these systems knew that debris management was just as important as fluid chemistry. Number 8, use distilled water only, never top off with tap water. Tap water contains minerals, calcium, magnesium, iron. Those minerals precipitate out when heated and form scale inside your cooling system. Scale acts like insulation, blocks heat transfer, clogs passages, and accelerates corrosion. I've cut open radiators from vehicles always topped off with tap water. The inside looks like the bottom of a tea kettle, white crusty scale coating every surface. That scale reduces the radiator's ability to transfer heat. The engine runs hotter, the fan runs more, fuel economy drops, and eventually the radiator fails not because it's old, but because it's insulated by mineral deposits. Distilled water costs $1 per gallon at any grocery store. A radiator replacement costs $1,200. Keep a gallon of distilled water in your garage. When the coolant level drops, top it off with distilled water. If you're mixing 50-50 coolant, use distilled water. This is one of the simplest, cheapest ways to extend cooling system life, and almost no one does it because they've never been told it matters. The only reason you don't hear about this is because it's too simple to monetize. A service advisor can't sell you distilled water, but they can sell you a radiator replacement in 5 years when the one you have is clogged with scale. Number 9, clean your radiator fins twice a year with a garden hose. Japanese engineers also tested cooling systems in desert conditions. High ambient temps, low humidity, dust. The radiator fins get clogged with dirt, pollen, and debris. Airflow drops and the radiator can't reject heat. The engine runs hot even though every internal component is functioning perfectly. Clean your radiator fins every spring and fall. Use a garden hose at low pressure, not a pressure washer. Spray from the engine side out toward the front of the car. This pushes debris out the way it came in. If you spray from the front, you push debris deeper into the fins. I've seen radiators so clogged with cottonwood seeds and dust that you couldn't see through the fins. The cooling system was perfect. New coolant, new thermostat, no leaks, but the engine overheated in traffic because no air could pass through the radiator. I pulled the radiator, cleaned it with a hose, reinstalled it. Problem solved. 0 parts cost. If you bring your car to a dealership with clogged fins, many will recommend radiator replacement instead of cleaning. Cleaning isn't profitable. Replacement is. A $1,200 radiator replacement recommended when a hose and 5 minutes would have solved it. The Japanese engineers designed the radiator fins to be cleaned. That expectation never made it into American owners' manuals. Number 10, use a $50 infrared thermometer to diagnose problems before they become emergencies. The gauge on your dashboard only tells you when something is already wrong. A $50 infrared thermometer tells you when something is starting to go wrong. Point it at the upper radiator hose and then the lower radiator hose. The temperature difference should be around 20 to 30 degrees. If it's less, your radiator isn't transferring enough heat. If it's more, you have a restriction or a flow problem. I use an infrared thermometer on every cooling system diagnosis. It takes 10 seconds and gives immediate feedback on whether the radiator is doing its job. I found a clogged radiator on a Lexus ES 350 using nothing but an infrared thermometer. The upper hose read 210 degrees, the lower hose read 200 degrees. A 10-degree difference is not enough. A healthy radiator should drop the temp by 25 to 30 degrees. The radiator was internally blocked with debris. I replaced it and the temperature spread went back to normal. I found clogged radiators, failed thermostats, and bad water pumps in 10 seconds by measuring temperature at different points in the system. You can buy a quality infrared thermometer for $50. Point it at the engine after a drive. The hottest spot should be near the thermostat housing. The coolest should be at the lower radiator hose after it exits the radiator. Hot spots on the cylinder head or near the water pump mean a circulation problem. Find it now before it becomes an overheating emergency. The reason no one hands you an infrared thermometer during a service appointment is because informed customers verify repairs instead of just approving them. That level of transparency doesn't benefit the shop, it benefits you. Here's the summary of what the Japanese maintenance schedule actually looks like versus what America tells you. Every 50,000 miles, full coolant exchange using vacuum fill and genuine Toyota red coolant with distilled water only. Every 100,000 miles, thermostat replacement, radiator cap replacement, full cooling system flush. Every oil change, coolant level check in the overflow reservoir, and physical hose inspection by feel, not just visual. Twice a year, radiator fin cleaning with a garden hose. Anytime you work near the cooling system, infrared thermometer check to verify temperature differential across the radiator. One approach costs around $300 every 100,000 miles in planned maintenance. The other approach costs thousands in unplanned repairs. I've worked on Toyotas with 400,000 miles that have never overheated, not once. The owners followed a schedule, they used genuine parts, they didn't wait for failures, and the cooling system outlasted the rest of the car. I've also worked on Toyotas with 100,000 miles with blown head gaskets, warped heads, and cracked blocks. Those owners followed the American maintenance schedule, waited for warning lights, and paid for it with repairs that cost more than the car was worth. The engineers gave you the roadmap, the mountains tested it. The maintenance schedule exists for mechanical reasons, not marketing ones. Follow it and your Toyota cooling system will likely outlast everything else on the car. Drop a comment and tell me what mileage your Toyota is at right now and which of these steps you're adding to your schedule. I read every single one.